Welcome to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, the show where brilliant professionals share how to sharpen the universal skills required to flourish at work. Enjoy more career fun, wins, meaning, and money with your host, Pete Makaitis.
Hello, and thanks so much for joining us here for episode 413 with Rob Jolles. Rob is sharing how you can come across as more credible. So you'll learn one, the number one reason why people don't believe you. Two, how method acting can lead you into peak presenting performance. And three, why you should embrace your own dysfunctions. So if you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items we've referenced, you'll find it over at awesomeatyourjob.com/F413. And now here's Rob's story. Rob Jolles is a sought-after speaker who teaches, entertains, and inspires audiences worldwide. His live programs around the world have enabled him to amass a client list of Fortune 500 companies that includes Disney, Toyota, GE, a dozen universities, and over 50 financial institutions. He is the best-selling author of 6 books, including his latest, Why People Don't Believe You, Building Credibility from the Inside Out. So thanks to Rob for sharing some time with us, and thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsor to check out is Harvard Business Review. This brilliant magazine, published at hbr.org, is the leading destination for smart management thinking. Fun fact, HBR has been mentioned in 108 episodes of the show. That's because HBR has great stuff that comes up often. They've got explainer videos, podcasts, real-world case studies, and much more. I think of HBR each night that I put on my special orange glasses. Their article, Will Blue Light Glasses Improve Your Sleep?, revealed that those who wore them reported better sleep and a 7% improvement in work performance as compared to those who wore the sham glasses. So I cite HBR anytime anyone tells me that I look silly wearing them. Now, much of HBR's content is available for free when you sign up at their site. Subscriptions that get you unlimited content cost $10 a month. If you visit hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME, you can save 10% off of that subscription. Again, to save 10% off of your HBR subscription, go to www.hbr.org/subscriptions and enter the promo code AWESOME. And big thanks to our sponsor, Acorns. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing for your future. You don't need a lot of money or expertise to invest with Acorns. In fact, you can get started with just your spare change. Acorns recommends an expert-built portfolio that fits you and your money goals, then automatically invests your money for you. NerdWallet.com, whom I love on these sorts of matters, gives Acorns a whopping 4.7 stars and says, quote, if you want to make the most of your spare change, there's no better place to do that than Acorns. Head to acorns.com/awesome or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. And we got a legal disclaimer here. It may not be representative of all clients. Tier 1 compensation provided. Compensation provides an incentive to positively promote Acorns. View important disclosures at acorns.com/awesome. Investing involves risk, including the loss of principal. Please consider your objectives, risk tolerance, and Acorns' fees before investing. Acorns Advisors LLC, Acorns, is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Brokerage services are provided to clients of Acorns by Acorns Securities LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. For more information, visit acorns.com. Now, here's Rob. Rob, thanks so much for joining us here on the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm excited to dig in, and I think you got so much good stuff to share. And maybe you'll be able to share it, if necessary, in a rapid format because you are a licensed auctioneer. How does one get licensed to be an auctioneer? And tell us a tale or two of your auctioneering adventures.
Okay. Well, when you have a big mouth and you're running around for 30 years giving seminars, everybody assumes, hey, this guy can do anything on a stage. But I want to tell you, in the state of Virginia, where I initially got licensed, it's harder than it looks. It was 80 hours of certified instruction to be allowed to take the 3.5-hour exam. And I had to study cattle and cars and horses and antiques. But really, all I wanted, unfortunately, there isn't a license like this, all I wanted to do was be able to work charities. I felt like it was a good way of giving back, maybe using my skills for something really valuable. So that's about 9.5 years ago. I took my courses, I got certified, and been probably average an auction a month, maybe an auction every other month, but 95% for charities.
Well, that's awesome. So then I guess if you're doing it for charities, then you're doing it for free. And I'm wondering, well, with all that like education, what would an auctioneer be paid if he or she were doing a gig for a bankruptcy? You know, hey, we got an auction and I am the auctioneer. I am well trained and licensed and educated. Like, what would that return in a gig?
Yeah, actually, it's usually a percentage of profit there. And for our charity auctioneers, we're not quite as fortunate. It's a fraction of what I normally get paid. So actually what I typically do with a charity is I sort of get paid a little, and then I never walk out the door with it. I just simply hand it back so that I can deduct it from my taxes. I want to stay true to the intent, which is there are certain things that we do in life that really have to pay the bills and keep the electricity running. And there are other times in life where we do things that are really just to help others. So when I speak at universities and things like that, and they have a little honorarium, what's the sense of me really taking that? I'm going to do something nice. Let's go all the way. That's for charities. Now, sometimes I'll do a shopping center or, I've done some universities. I'll take a little something, but it's a fraction of what I normally get.
Understood. And have you ever auctioned off anything crazy or strange or just noteworthy?
Yeah, I'll tell you the best thing I ever auctioned off, believe it or not. And this is for anybody that's ever thinking of putting an auction together. This is what you're looking for. It's not a yard sale. When Letterman was still doing his show, we got 2 tickets to Letterman. Well, they're free, but we got backstage passes, and you can't always do that. And then we Marriott threw in a couple nights, and we got 2 train tickets. And when we packaged that all together, and particularly with that unique ability to get backstage, something you can't really get on your own, sort of like Saturday Night Live tickets, that item went for a little over $30,000. It was fairly simple. That, and we also got, one time I auctioned off tickets to the Academy Awards. Again, something you can't normally get on your own. You're not going to find it on Craigslist. Other than the limo, I think that was in the $30,000 to $35,000 range. So those are the kind of things that really actually will excite an audience.
I mean, that is very clever. So if there are any, fundraisers in the house, there's the trick. You get something you can't get under normal circumstances, and then you package it together into a cool experience. And there it is. The secret
Bingo.
to a successful fundraising auction. Didn't even know we were going to learn that today. Thank you. But what I was planning on learning a bit about was some of the wisdom in your book, Why People Don't Believe You. Great title. Tell us, what's the big idea? Why don't people believe you?
When you say big idea, and I'm ready for you now, because I actually thought, what is the big idea? I better know that. It is my book. I think the big idea is there's 2 of them. First of all, I'm pleased you like the title. It wasn't my title, but most of us who write books, we'll get everything but our title in there. The publisher typically knows more about titles than we do, but the big idea in my original title was it's not the words, it's the tune. So a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this, spending 30 years of my career, my life, running around the country teaching people what to say. We don't really stop and say, wait a minute, let's forget the words. How are we saying it? And so I'd say, in a sense, that's part of the bigger picture of the book. But to really drill down on your question, I think the biggest reason why people don't believe us, as strange as this may sound, is we don't believe us. And things in the book, I know they sound simple, but so are asking questions and listening. But who does that? So, and it's such a fundamental communication piece. The easiest way to be believed is actually to tell the truth.
Okay.
And when you stop and think about that, do you have the best podcast out there? From what I hear, it sure is. But you have to believe that. And if it isn't, you have to do everything you can to make it a great podcast, to put your heart and soul into it. And if you go to bed at night and you truly believe that, you don't have to worry about sounding authentic. Now you believe it, and the tune will follow.
Ooh, I like that a lot. Well, so now you're getting me thinking here, because we were talking just beforehand when I was stalking you and deciding whether or not to invite you, and you passed. Nice job. You made reference to the greatest life insurance salesperson ever. Ben Feldman is his name, if anyone wants to take a look. So I'm always intrigued by the greatest in the world. And I sort of listened to an interview with Ben Feldman, and he doesn't sound super engaging in the interview, but boy, does he believe in life insurance being just like a powerful force for goodness, for humanity. I mean, it's clear that he believes that with a deep, abiding passion, which is striking, because I haven't thought of life insurance in that way before. But there you have it. The best of the world had that at a really high level.
Let's put a cherry on that sundae, because, yep, he completely dominated the insurance industry for decades. And I mean dominated, from the sprawling metropolis of East Liverpool, Ohio. But how about this that we add to that story? The fact is, he was the greatest that ever lived by the numbers. and he spoke with a lisp. He was actually a fairly quiet guy. He didn't have any of the attributes that we naturally associate with, the greatest salesperson, a Glengarry Glen Ross kind of Alec Baldwin character. He was the complete opposite. I guess when you hear that, whoever's listening, just remember that he was true to his own unique style. You can't imitate this guy. The best imitation you can do is of yourself. So not only did he believe in his product, he was true to his style. He didn't emulate anyone but himself, and that's what made him really successful.
All right. So you're telling the truth. You're believing it deep down. And if you're not yet believing it, you're doing all you can to get there with believing it in terms of improving the actual kind of facts of the situation. And so then when it comes to the tune, how do we sing a tune that's more appealing?
It's interesting you say sing, because as I was working through the manuscript, I was actually at one point trying to create a musical score, in a sense, of the tune. My musical score had places where we would pause, had places where we would change our pitch, had places where we would change our pace. Actually, all found in music, if you think about it. And unfortunately, although I'll work on pitch and pace and pause with people, the problem is every question you just asked me right now, I can't go, okay, hang on 1 second. Let me figure out where my pitch goes up, and let me figure out where I'm going to slow this down and where I'm going to speed it up. So we do focus on pitch, pace, and pause, which to me are critical pieces. But the key is to get that authentic voice, to do it without having to sort of stop and micromanage where those pieces are. I don't know if when you're talking to me, for instance, you're gesturing with your hands, but imagine if we stopped and I said, point here. Okay, put your hand up over there. We want that to kind of become as natural as we can. So I think one of the secret sauces, if you will, of the book is actually thinking more like a method actor. What if we took ourselves and actually placed ourselves in the moment? I don't mean just in the moment. I mean, even the point we were just talking about, truly believing. Well, maybe we're getting beat up a little bit out there right now. Maybe our product it's just been tough for us. But weren't there times in our life where everything we touched sort of worked out well, where we knew the next time we picked up the phone or knocked on a door, it was going to go well? The other 6 did. Why can't we as a method actor take ourselves to that moment? Are you telling me that when we knock on the door this time, we're going to be less effective with that in our mind? And that's where that pitch, pace, and pause sometimes can come more naturally.
Okay, gotcha. So you're saying let's not put our focus on, okay, at this point in my second sentence, I'm going to drop my pitch low.
Right.
And sort of plan that out in great detail, but rather to get in the zone associated with when you were rocking and rolling and believing and nailing it and high performing. So just sort of method acting into that spot, and these things will sort of naturally follow well. Could you maybe bring this all together in an example or a case study of someone whose credibility wasn't so hot, and then they did some things and they saw it really get hot again?
Sure. Actually, this whole book really began with me in a bad mood and a bad evening, being asked to speak to a group called a Career Network Ministry, a group that just helps people in career transition. And I don't necessarily like to speak free a whole lot, but I fumbled my way in and figured I'll talk to a dozen people and get this over with. There were 250 to 300 people in the room. I've been volunteering for 6 years ever since. It was such a moving experience. But one of the things I noticed in that room, and that was my petri dish, that's where this started, was I noticed words. We were working on resumes, words. We were working on elevator pitches, words. We were working on LinkedIn sites, words. We were working on the words, and nobody was focusing on the tune. So to answer your question, I actually started about 5.5 years ago. I put together my first group of 12 people, and to get in this program 2 days, you had to be unemployed a minimum of 2 years. Half my room was unemployed for over 5 years. That's chronic unemployment. We put on a 2-day program, and I bumbled and fumbled my way through it, but we were hitting on something because 10 of the 12 people were hired within 3 months. And that's when I realized, okay, we've got something. But I'm telling you, going back on some of the questions you asked, I wasn't working on the words in there. I took that elevator pitch, and there's some value in those, but I put it in the corner, and we worked on their character. We worked on who they were, what they were, taking them to those moments of success. And man, the hands and the words and the pitch and the pace, it followed. But there's an answer to your question. It was 10 for 12 coming out of the gate. And that's when I knew, I think we may even have a book here, but I got to keep digging into this.
Well, that's fascinating. Well, do tell, what are some of the most impactful transformational exercises or practices that make that come alive?
Wow, that's a good question. Well, one of them we were talking about is whenever I ask them anything, I really try and trim people down to what I call a communication shot clock. I mean, look, there's a shot clock in basketball. It keeps the game moving. There's a shot clock in football, actually. It keeps the game moving. There's may very well be a shot clock in baseball. They're going to try it in preseason to keep the game moving. We are in a society now where books are getting smaller and people just don't have that bandwidth to stay with us. Even our videos are 4 to 6 minutes in length. So one of the things as an example was stop talking to them, getting them up to speed, getting them into character, and working on their shot clock, meaning trimming those questions down and saying, you know what, rather than giving me your 3 best points, give me your best point, and if I want more, I'll ask for it. It was an example of really trying to get them a little bit quicker, a little bit lighter on their feet. As an example, that was one technique that we used.
So then you said with the shot clock, is there an optimal, do you recommended time that you would put on the shot clock in terms of number of seconds that you would speak before being quiet?
Yeah, I actually have a number, and I'm going to give it to you, but please understand I'm answering your question. So it's sort of like when I teach people to sell, and I'm saying you got to ask second and third level questions, the hand will go up and say, exactly how many? And it's like, well, that's going to really depend on the personality of the client, et cetera. But I really actually like 45 seconds. I think it's a great number. And if I go 1:10, that's okay. And if we go shorter, that's okay too. A lot of the times, if I'm dealing with a more social environment, more social client, I kind of got the green light to go a little bit longer. If I'm dealing with a more dominant client, I'm probably going to trim back. So there's other variables. But I love the conversation we're having because I get frustrated when people are bobbing and weaving, saying, but give me a number. So I think 45 seconds is a good target, but read your audience.
Certainly, yes. Well, and that is a helpful benchmark because I think it's possible that you can underspeak as well. So if I'm just thinking about this, I said, hey, tell us about you becoming a licensed auctioneer. It's like, I had 80 hours of instruction and then passed a 3-hour exam. It's like, okay, well, Rob, this is really interesting.
Can't wait to have you back on the show. You're really talented.
So I think that makes good sense in terms of it's a very rough ballpark zone. But if you're 5 seconds, it's like, okay, do you hate me? What's going on here? It's hard to form a connection.
Yeah.
And if you're too long, it's like, okay, I already sort of got the message I was after way earlier and ready to move on to something else. So I appreciate that. So, okay, that's one principle is the communication shot clock. And what are some of the other practices or exercises that are really transformational here?
Well, and I'm going to give you a couple more, but I want to give you a big picture here because this is kind of, if studying my career, I'm actually going at a different angle right now. I got my hardcore training with Xerox, and you didn't tie your shoe without a process of some sort at Xerox. But when you have a process, you have a way of measuring what you're doing. And when you can measure it, you can fix it. So boy, am I a repeatable, predictable process person. And yet the topic that we're in, I sort of had to look at the mirror and go, it's not all process oriented. I sort of reframed it in my mind and I said, it's more about percentages. Meaning, it's sort of like when we eat, okay? Well, I'm a healthy person. Good. Well, what do? Well, I no longer put sugar in my coffee, just stevia. That's it? Yep, that's it. Well, okay. If you really do that all the time and you're a big coffee drinker, I guess that's about a 1%, 2% play. I don't know if you're healthier yet, but I guess it beats the alternative. But you look at healthy people as an example, and they're doing 15, 20 things, exercise, this, that. Together, they create a formidable percentage. What we're talking about right now is really percentage plays. So a communication shot clock gives us a couple of percentage points. Truly believing in ourselves gives us percentage points. Taking ourselves mentally to a place where we're successful gives us percentage points. I'm going to give you percentage points as opposed to process. And like I said, I'm almost arguing with me right now because I'm so bred into process, but we're into a topic that is more percentage than process.
And so when you say percentage, you're sort of using this as a label of a different means of thinking about approaches, such that a process seems to imply if you do A, B, C, D, E, F, you will arrive at this end result. Whereas percentage says of the result you're after, one thing can account for, 5% of getting to the result, and another thing can account for 10% of the thing. And so thusly, you're kind of suggesting that an ABCDE process ain't going to get you 100% of the way to where you want to be.
Exactly. So let me give you a percentage move as an example, and thank you, because that's exactly what I'm saying, by the way.
Oh, cool.
So a percentage move for me, a lot of people, for instance, when they're struggling to be believed, and they're, okay, I'm going to believe in myself, this and that, but this company, they're looking at 4 other people, and one of them, I don't know, they may have a better relationship. Well, they might not. I love really actually focusing the brain on playing the course and not the opponent. And I'm going to get percentage pieces out of this, because by that I mean, if you watch actually a good golfer, it's shocking. They never look at the scoreboard until for 3 days. They don't look at the scoreboard. They don't care. They'll look when the final 2 holes, 3 holes, because they may have to change their strategy. But how in the world do you play a competitive event without looking around at your opponent? And the answer is, well, what value does looking at the opponent really have? If you sink a 40-foot putt, good for you. Me focusing on that not only doesn't change a thing, it removes the focus from my putt. It removes the focus from what I'm doing. So I think, as an example, we spend too much time worrying about things we can't control. Honestly, if I thought worrying about it would move the dial 1 percentage point, I would be the most competitive warrior you ever met. But it actually takes away. It doesn't add. So things like playing the course, not the opponent. Things like accepting your limp. You started with the conversation about Ben Feldman. And again, look him up, folks. Like I said, he was not, appearance-wise, he wasn't necessarily that natural salesperson, look or sound. But in a sense, he had his own limp. We all walk with a limp. Do you know how many people are held back from their own ability to convince others because of their limp? Look, I lost my hair. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I had to accept it. It's one of my limps. But what I found is the moment it stopped being important to me, it was never really important to anybody else. It was me that was focused and obsessed. And if we take that example and look at people that just have certain issues that, maybe that they don't have that natural punch in their voice, it's okay. Don't be somebody you're not. Just move it from a 2 to a 4. That's all I'm asking. But if we accept our limp, if we play that course, we don't have to misuse our imagination. The lovely quote I actually have by my coffee bar: worry is the misuse of your imagination. It's a wonderful quote. If we start removing those pieces, each thing I'm talking about is getting us 1% here and 3% here and 2% there. And I can give you 5 more, but I think you're getting the drift of it.
I am, I think, getting the drift of it. And I imagine you've given me the biggest percentages already up front. Is that fair to say?
It depends on the mood that I'm in, and it actually depends on the person, because when you're communicating, for instance, if you just pay attention to your transitions, so many people will micromanage the body of whatever they're communicating about, particularly presenters. If they actually micromanage the transitions and stuck their landing in the end and spent 90% of their time on the opening, they would increase their credibility. So you see, again, because it's percentage plays, each percentage move will fit a different customer a different way. But yeah, I'm not wasting your time. I'm giving you ones that I think really resonate, and I see get a big bang for the buck from most of the people that I'm working with.
Oh, great. Now, let me just make sure I got the transitions point clear. You're just saying if you're like doing a presentation or a speech, you want to give some extra attention to how you're transitioning from one section to another instead of fumbling or being awkward during those moments?
Yeah, I did chuck that one in from left field, didn't I? Absolutely. I train a lot of speakers. The irony is usually that the core of most presentations have, for oftentimes, particularly for corporate America, but oftentimes they've gone through a legal read. We can't really change them all that much. So what makes a great communicator and an average communicator? It's not the body of the message. It's them coming out of the gate with an interesting story or an idea, really addressing what's in it for the client. So thinking at the beginning, but to get right at what you just asked, the transitions, yeah, we probably have 3 or 4 major points. If I really think those out, I'm not a guy who believes in scripts, but if I actually write them out, maybe back them down to a word outline, if I spend my time working on how I'm going from point A to point B and sewing that body together, and as I said, coming out of the gate strong and sticking my landing, closing strongly, yeah, I'll probably give one of the best presentations I've ever given, but it has very little to do with memorizing the body. That's not where success lies.
Okay, that's interesting because the big chunks, one, they may be unmovable because there was a legal review. Two, you probably remember them just because one thing leads to another. This is the story about how I formed an accountability group in college, right? Okay, all right, hey, that's one chunk, and I know it, and we'll go and make it happen. And so, but what I don't know so much is how I'm going to move from maybe that piece to how friendship is important.
Right. And by the way, that's the way most people do it. They'll go and fall out that friendship is important. But when they transition with, we all have these different pieces, as I've just mentioned, but there's one piece that we don't pay attention to, and that's friendship. You see, friendship is important. Something along that line so that it's effortless. And when people walk away, they go, boy, that was really good. Yeah. Now, look, we could spend our time talking about presentations. I'm going to involve that audience. The more they talk, the more they typically like and trust that presenter. I'm going to do other things. But it's the transitions, even when we communicate and are not giving presentations. What if we're giving just in front of somebody giving a proposal? What if we're having a conversation and we want to get to 3 major points? It's that smooth transition as opposed to that bumpity bump, bump, bump. Sounds like Pete wanted to talk about this one. That's the one I want to avoid. That doesn't sound authentic. And we circle back to our topic, which is why people don't believe you, because it's not sounding authentic.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. Well, I get a real kick out of it when the transition is to, so can I have your money? And it's done poorly. It's like, oh, you poor guy. I'm already on board with your vision, so it's fine. But
yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's dig into a little bit of this now. So believing in yourself, that sounds classic and helpful and essential. But in practice, if your belief in self is moderate, like, yeah, I could do a decent job most of the time, I guess. How does one elevate that?
Yeah. Did you ever see, there was a commercial done years ago by FedEx. It's actually on YouTube. You can find it online. It's called The Stolen Idea. And it deals with a boss who's asking for ideas. And one guy says, well, we could probably save money by putting all our shipping in one area and using FedEx. And we could hear a pin drop. 5 seconds later, the boss says, I got it. We can put everything in one area. We can use FedEx to do it all, and that will save us on shipping. And everybody goes, oh, that's brilliant. The guy says, well, you just said the same thing I said, only you did this. And he's moving his hands horizontally. And the boss says, nope, I did this. And he moves his hand vertically because that was his gesture. I actually look at that commercial and I think that's our jumping off point. Yes, I know what FedEx was after. And shame on that boss for stealing that idea. But you know what? We need to teach people how to do this. This matters. That moving of the hands, that really matters. So to me, it's a matter of kind of oftentimes finding your real voice. Not finding some voice you saw on television or you heard in a podcast, but finding your real voice. I don't know the last time you've been on a plane, but when you're on a plane and the flight attendant starts speaking, you think, it's funny. He or she was just here. We had a nice conversation. But now I'm hearing this really weird sing-song. That's not a real voice. Why is it that a lot of times when we're presenting or when we're under pressure, we start going after this, I guess, the voice we thought we were supposed to have. Nobody wants that. People just want to believe, and they want that to be authentic. And I always look at people and I think, if we were 2 people having a beer or having a cup of coffee, would you still talk and walk and behave this way, or would you just drop all that and have a conversation? So it's really about finding that real voice. And honestly, you don't have to look that far. And I whisper this to presenters right before they go on stage when they're a little bit tight. The last words I'll typically tell somebody is, if you were walking into your living room, what would you feel and how would you take that stage? That's your living room. Now go enjoy yourself. Forget all that other nonsense. In the living room, it's pretty easy. Well, that's all the audience wants, whether it's 50 people, 500 people, or one person. They're in your living room. Go have a conversation. We don't need anything but authenticity.
It's funny when you say the living room, my first thought is, well, I'm taking off these dress shoes and putting on my slippers.
Well, I knew a presenter who was actually very successful. Now, this was in the 90s, but he was a finance person and a finance specialist, which already you think, well, okay, here comes that big old suit. But he would take his shoes off when he went on that stage. And, it was kind of his shtick. It was like George Burns smoking a cigar or something. This was his shtick. He was the guy who would take his shoes off. But you know what? It worked for him. It wasn't shtick. I got a chance to speak to him a couple times, and he just wanted to get to a place where he was as comfortable as he could be, because then he could take that communication and make them as comfortable as they can be. Last thing about that, but it's really important to understand that an audience really, they want to enjoy themselves. They want you to be successful. The best way to make an audience uncomfortable is for you to be uncomfortable.
It's very true.
Then they feel badly for you, and then they have a problem. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It just hurts to watch someone who's bombing.
Oh, yeah.
They know they're bombing. They're nervous about bombing. And it's like, oh, man. And it's just fun to watch someone having fun. It's like, you know what? I'm not super into the content of what you're saying, but it's kind of enjoyable to watch you be into it. And yeah, take it away.
Yeah. That's the funny thing. If you think about some of the great Johnny Carson or Jay Leno or Jimmy Fallon, what are some of the most enjoyable parts of the monologue, of the conversation? When something bombs, they don't put their head in their hand and go, oh no, what happened here? What they do is they just work with it. And the audience loves it because you didn't make the audience feel sorry for you. You said to them, in a sense, I'm glad this happened. Let's just work with it. And when you can take that with you and realize that what's the worst that can happen, really just making them feel badly. So don't. Away we go. It's a lot easier up there than you think.
That's true. I think I've made some references to like maybe college audiences, and they're just like, we have no idea what that is. I was like, oh, I guess I'm getting old. And then we all just sort of begin to sort of laugh about that. It was like, yep, okay. Right. And then away we go. As opposed to, oh, I'm so stupid. I shouldn't make that illusion. Look up the dates next time, right. Pete. Oh, bad.
Something, Pete, you hit on something else that I think is actually really important. When we're not in front of people, and remember, we're talking about building credibility, believing in yourself, and then taking that to others. And my wife helped me with this one. Do you know how innocently that inner voice starts chirping at you of, if you had half a brain, you would have remembered to bring this with you on the road. Hey, stupid, don't forget that. Do you know that that's a lot more dangerous than we give it credit? It doesn't have to be in front of anyone. It can just be with ourselves. But, you keep beating yourself up like that, you're going to start believing it. So I really, some years ago, decided it's not okay to make fun of me and to start moaning and whining and complaining about certain things. People forget things. 2.5 million miles in the air. Believe me, I forgot things in my bag. But I've decided, and it really works, and I think it works for others, to be a lot kinder to yourself. Stop chirping and beating yourself up about things. Just like we were talking about in front of an audience, be nice to yourself when there isn't an audience in front of you too.
I'd love to hit that point real quick. So if you are in that mental habit, how does one kick it?
Yeah. Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to go from unconsciously incompetent, which is, hey, that's okay, or, I don't even notice it, to really starting to become aware of it. It becomes, I don't know if you've ever heard of the 4 levels of conscious behavior, but we start with unconscious incompetency, which is sometimes we don't know that we don't know. So that's a dangerous place to be. Well, that's why you and I are having this conversation, because now maybe we'll be on the lookout for it. As a matter of fact, just talking about it, I can assure you, there are many people who are listening right now who go, I do that, but I don't mean anything by it. I'm telling you, it's a cancer. It grows. You don't realize it. So let's move you to conscious incompetency, which means I want you to be aware when you do it. Then let's move to conscious competency. I want you to be a little robotic, and every time it accidentally happens, I want you to stop and correct it. And I know that's a little bit stiff and weird until we become unconsciously competent. When we do it, and we don't have to think about it anymore. But it's natural to be on that scale. The first thing is we have to remind ourselves it's not okay. It is not okay.
Okay. All right. Well, so now
I said it's not okay. Sorry.
That is not okay. And I am now acknowledging what you've said and moving to something new.
Yeah, okay. I got to climb in through the window there. I was out there yelling at people. Okay, I'm back in. Let's keep going.
Well, so let's talk about that process by which you take yourself back to a place in which you were successful, and thusly you method act your way into having a high performance moment. In practice, what are the steps to make that happen?
Well, the first thing, and I'm going to leave the corporation out, but it's a Fortune 500 company I've been working with on this. And we actually, one of the things we did was, again, think method acting. What we did was we began to, on a piece of paper, create a character. One of my favorite actors is Daniel Day-Lewis. I'm not sure he's ever going to be in another movie again, but I don't know if you saw Lincoln, but if you did, it was probably a little slower than you imagined. I knew it was going to be slow because I actually read a bunch of books on Lincoln. And Lincoln wasn't the most exciting person in the world. But on set, you had to call Daniel Day-Lewis either Mr. President or Mr. Lincoln, okay? He doesn't mess around. When we're talking, to answer your question, when we're talking about getting into character, sometimes we have to sit and actually think about that character. So I did some acting earlier in my life. I remember the first play I was in, I was Benny Van Buren in Damn Yankees. I was supposed to play a 70-year-old, but I had a great director who, by the way, I spoke to when I wrote this book, and we talked about this. And I remember him saying, what kind of car does Benny drive? What kind of cereal does he eat? Tell me about his house. What's his office look like? And what he was doing, at first I thought he was a lunatic. I don't know. It's just a character I'm playing. But he didn't want me to learn the script. At some point, I knew that character so well, I walked around, I was 70 years old in my mind. So what I do sometimes is actually get people on a piece of paper to begin to actually write out their character a little bit. Not necessarily what kind of cereal do they eat, but tell me about your character. Perform some tasks in front of me like your character. Forget everything else. We clear the mind. We work on establishing a character, and actually, for some people, it'll be 3 characters. It's a more dominant character, it's a more social character, and it's a more analytical character. And if you're wondering why in the world I do that, it's because I work with a lot of salespeople. We have to kind of mirror the character we see in front of us. So maybe I'm very social. What if I'm talking to somebody who's really dominant? Well, I'll just play the role of a dominant person, not so fast. You better understand, before you put that white glove on, you better understand that character. So we actually write it out and think about it. And I actually give them simple questions, like a questionnaire, and they begin to role play and really get in touch with that character. And then they can tap into it when they need it.
Okay, interesting. So you're mapping that out up front. You're doing some role play there. And you also had Todd Herman talk about his book, The Alter Ego Effect. And he recommended sometime putting on like a blazer or glasses or something that just sort of enclothed cognition, sort of stepping into that all the more. So that's handy. And so then I'm also wondering, is there some visualization or some key memories that you're bringing up, and how do you go about doing that part?
Yeah, and that's where we go into that piece about, for me at least, and remember, I frequently work with people who are selling, okay? So, look, what I'm trying to have them visualize are moments of dominance, moments of success. It's weird. I'm 26 years in business as a professional speaker, and yet, just like everyone else, sometimes you're as good as your last presentation. You're as good as your last quarter. All of a sudden, Speakers Bureau threw 3 clients at me. I spoke to them on the phone. None of them wanted to hire me. What do you think I sound like on the 4th call? And so what I'm trying to do is get to moments where when we do get 3 in a row, when we do knock it out of the park, and somebody says, okay, now I have another client I want you to talk to. That's what I mean in terms of that visualization of, okay, maybe I'm not there right now, but I can think back on when I was and what was I feeling like. And so I sort of take myself to that moment. And Pete, it comes back to that percentage play. I'm not guaranteeing you that we're going to, be successful right now, but I guarantee you this, having that mindset and being able to pull that memory down is going to pick us up some percentage plays, and that's what I'm looking for. So it's mental, but it's there. No one has had a life of complete loss. It's everybody. We win some, we lose some. We win some, we lose some. It's when we lose some a bunch in a row that all of a sudden the shoulders start to droop. We kind of start picking up the phone going, in our mind, I know this guy isn't going to buy it for me, but here we go. That's not going to work for anybody.
Yeah, that's great. So thinking right back to, the hot streak, the winning moments. That's good. That's good.
Well, it's the winning moments, and I keep pushing everything into sales, but in presentations, a lot of times, particularly when somebody is new or somebody, I'll also whisper in their ear track record, because maybe people who are listening right now have got 10 or 20 years under their belt, but maybe this quarter hasn't been so good, or maybe they haven't given a presentation in a while, or they're being put in an awkward position. What's your track record like? And most people go, well, usually I'm pretty good at that. Okay, again, I'm looking for a couple percentage moves. I don't even forget the experience. How about we focus on what usually happens, Pete, when you have a podcast? What usually happens when I'm a guest on a podcast? It usually goes real well. Not all the time, but usually goes real well. I'm better off kind of focusing on my track record. But that's, to me, another kind of really great visualization. It's simple and it's easy.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, tell me, is there anything that you recommend that we really don't do? We've talked about the negative self-talk, not doing that. We talked about not stepping into who you think that you are supposed to be, but rather just using your own natural, authentic voice. Any other, top don'ts you want to make sure we highlight?
That's a great question. I'm actually thinking of how I would address that. Yeah, I would say that I think we should stop being so fearful of dysfunction. We brought it up a little bit when maybe things don't go well in front of an audience. But I think, again, whether it's while we're alone or whether we're in groups, I like to tell people that I'm coaching or working with, let's embrace that dysfunction a little bit. Kind of going back to that limp a little bit, let's remember that there's only two types of people that don't walk with a limp, that don't have some level of dysfunction. They're either not telling you the truth, or they would have no ability to have compassion for another individual. Both of them really aren't necessarily people I'd want to have as a client, I can tell you that much. It's funny, I wrote a piece one time where I said, knowledge is overrated. And believe me, all the analyticals practically followed me to the parking lot going, now, what did you mean by that? They were not happy. I didn't say it's not important. I just said it's overrated, meaning if we just, as simple as it sounds, but I'm a guy who takes and has people record themselves. If we just work harder on asking questions and listening, if we just go a little easier on ourselves, if we embrace that dysfunction rather than run from it and understand that's okay, that's my limp, I'm not going to have trouble with it. All those little pieces get us plays. Just last real quick point, but I'm in a neighborhood where we've got a lot of dog walkers, including our Lily, who we take for a walk. And there's not one but two dogs that are missing legs, a leg each. I got to tell you, it touches my heart because I look at them and I think, I wish we were more like that. Because I promise you, Pete, that dog doesn't give a hootenanny that is missing a leg. And neither does any other dog that's walking by it. They're sniffing. They're curious where they might have been on that tree over there, but they don't care. It's not an issue. I wish we could learn lessons like that and remember that whatever it is, and everybody's got one, if it's not a worry for you, it's not a worry for the other dogs in the park, I promise you.
Awesome. Well, anything else you want to make sure to mention before we shift gears and hear about some of your favorite things?
Yeah, I would say, as strange as this conversation may have sounded, because we're talking about some kind of wacky, wants us in role and character. What is all that? I want to remind people they'll probably do this more often than they think. And an example I'll give you is if you have children that you parent, don't tell me that you don't actually drop into role, meaning particularly for the younger ones, when they brought back a homework assignment that wasn't quite right or something, we kind of look at our spouse and go, okay, I'll go in there. And we play the role of disappointed. And I'm actually not as disappointed. I love you so much. You do so. But for tonight, Rob Jolles will be playing the role of disappointed. And I think we do that more naturally than we think. So where we've really explored this finding a character and getting into role, please remember there are times where we all play roles. You're just not thinking about it as much. So I want you to think about it, then I want you to stop thinking about it again. That'd be the last thought I give you on that one.
All right, thank you. Well, now could you share with us a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
I gave you one, which is, worry is the misuse of your imagination. So, okay, now I'll give you another one. We weren't put on this earth to make a living. We were put on this earth to make a difference. It's always meant something to me, particularly for a guy who, when I tell you I got 2.5 million miles in the air, Pete, part of you should smile and part of you should look concerned, meaning, well, does this guy have a family? Does this guy have children? Does he get to a birthday party? And I'm really blessed. I have a wonderful wife, Ronnie, who helped me realize that I was a little out of balance earlier in my career. And I didn't really take that, I never heard of that quote, nor did I take it to heart. But I really believe in balance, and I'm no longer a 1K. That's just fine by me. I think that we focus on that, things will go a lot better for us.
And how about a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
I'll tell you a bit of research or a study, and it kind of falls into an author I happen to like. He's with my publisher, Barrett Kohler. His name is Noah Blumenthal, but he wrote a book called Be the Hero. But he studied how easy it is for us to make negative opinions of others, particularly the others that have done us wrong. Maybe a previous boss or a neighbor or somebody, the person at CVS, I don't know, where it really rubbed us the wrong way. He really got me thinking, and it's really helped, that we really don't know many of the people that we form opinions about. We really don't know them that well. And we create a scenario that's usually very negative. Now, that scenario might be right, but we actually don't know whether it's right or not.
And how about a favorite tool, something that helps you be awesome at your job?
I keep a journal. I've kept it for 22 years. But what I found was by methodically being observant, which is what a journal will do, because I will only write twice in my journal, on the way out and on the way back of a trip. So I am almost OCD-ish. I will, when we get to 10,000 feet, I'm putting a date and a location on that journal entry. But it's a tool that actually, particularly for the way back, that allows me to kind of figure out, to stop, pause, and in process say, okay, what do you think was working there and what do you think wasn't working there? And like I said, I've been doing this 31 years, putting a mic around my neck and talking to audiences. And yet I want you to know, Pete, that I still want to get better. And that means I still want to figure out, okay, what did we do well? What can we improve? And very importantly, I always balance that feedback because I've said it too many times already, but this isn't a beat up session. A lot of times we undervalue taking time to figure out what we're doing well. So we don't do it by accident, but that's been a tool. I probably have well over 3,000 pages of journal entries.
Cool. Thank you. And is there a particular nugget you share that really seems to connect and resonate with folks and they quote it back to you at times?
If you want to get at the most fundamental way to communicate, we have to ask questions and listen. And that doesn't just mean what you and I are doing right now, or if we're going one-on-one with a client or a prospect, even in front of an audience. If you want to know what the amateurs and even the pros do wrong, if I put down the 20 biggest mistakes they make, 19 of them don't equal number one, which is too much information. And that means constricting the ability for that audience to communicate with you, even if it's rhetorical questions. But those little touches, those little turn to your left, look at that partner, say 3 things here, try 2 things there, that ability to build a conversation as opposed to a lecture are very valuable. And I would like to think that I've said it enough that who knows, maybe people would associate that with me. I'd be proud if they did.
And if folks want to learn more, get in touch, where would you point them?
Well, that's an easy one. I would just take them to JOLLES.com, and that's where you'll find I write something called a blarticle. I'm in my 10th year of blarticles, and that's a blog article. I just try, by legal definition, it's 500 to 700 words. I just try and practice what we're preaching, you and I, which is let's not over communicate, but let's provide value and drip out information. But anyway, that's where all sorts of information on me is.
And do you have a final challenge or a call to action for folks seeking to be awesome at their jobs?
Okay. Pete, you're really coming at me. I like this. Yeah, my final challenge would be, I don't care who you are. I don't care what you think is out there holding you back. Get out of your own way. And you and Pete, you and I have hit it over and over and over again. Just be kinder to yourself. Accept whatever limp you have. And I can assure you, you've got one. That's okay. Don't let it be a big issue. It won't be with anybody else. And go in there. And again, the easiest way to find that authentic you is just get up there wherever it is, tell the truth. And if the truth is a struggle right now, double back and figure out, I got to rebrand, I got to do something, but I got to find a way of telling the truth. If you solve that, then you've got it made. The rest is easy.
Beautiful. Rob, this has been a blast. Thanks so much for bringing it. I wish you lots of luck with your speaking and all you're up to.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
I got a real big kick out of how Rob was pointing to the potential tendency to just sort of switch into another voice that is not your own when you're doing a presentation. Like, oh, it's business time. Oh, it's presentation time. Oh, it's formal time. I want to adopt this different persona, which is often counterproductive in terms of achieving your goal of seeming totally credible, believable, and folks jiving and vibing with your authentic you self that you're delivering there. So I thought that was handy in terms of you be you, but do the method acting to be in the best version and the most applicable flavor of you for the occasion. You're still being you. You're still being authentic, but you're choosing to do it professionally, and you're not choosing to be a totally different person entirely. So I thought that was some useful distinctions to think about that in terms of, all right, am I still keeping it real, or am I kind of entering a totally different person? And a good rule of thumb to check yourself there. Again, the show notes, the transcript, the links to items we've referenced are over at awesomeatyourjob.com/ep413. Hope you'll push subscribe. If you do, you'll catch our next guest. It's Gretchen Anderson. She's got a boatload of research about how cultural change happens. Hope to catch you there. Peace.
Thanks for listening. To get the most out of the show, we recommend 2 key things. First, check out the extra resources at awesomeatyourjob.com. You can find this episode's transcript and links, as well as the perfect episode for your situation. You can search the full text transcripts of hundreds of episodes or explore episodes tagged by topic and competency covered. Second, subscribe to the podcast and get future episodes automatically. You can subscribe by telling Siri and several other smartphones and speakers, subscribe to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, or by tapping subscribe in your podcast player of choice. If you'd like some extra help figuring out podcasts and how subscriptions work, visit awesomeatyourjob.com/subscribe for guidance. Hope to catch you on the next episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job.
1, 2, 3, 4. Those are numbers, but you already knew that. If you want to know what number you're going to pay each month for your car, use Kelley Blue Book My Wallet on Auto Trader. They're really good at numbers. Auto Trader.